Every digital transformation is different, but the issues that come up in drafting, negotiating, implementation, and integration agreements are almost always the same. My name is Marcus Harris. I am a software and technology attorney. For the last 20 years, I've focused my practice on drafting, negotiating technology-related agreements, and litigating failed software disputes in courts across the country. When you are negotiating a digital transformation deal, there's going to be two components of that software contract package. There's going to be the software license or the SaaS agreement, and while that's critically important, I think that the likelihood that your implementation or integration is going to fail because of a technology issue, which is what the software or SaaS agreement primarily deals with, is probably unlikely. I think the reality is that the software or technology platform most likely works, and it's certainly been integrated successfully for other customers in other areas of the world. And the likelihood that you're going to have a technology failure, I think, is on the lower side. More likely, though, from a failure perspective, I think, is that there is going to be a failure of the process. There's going to be a people failure, and the best way to mitigate that is by really focusing on the negotiation and drafting of both the services agreement, professional services agreement, master services agreement, they're called different things, and the associated statements of work that are usually attached to that contract. With respect to a statement of work, you really want to focus on what the scope of the project is. It needs to be well defined. You have to make sure that you have a robust and substantive change order procedure that doesn't just detail what the change in scope is, but has an approval process for it. It details what the costs are going to be, what the change in the scope is, what its impact is on deliverables, milestones, deadlines, and ultimately the go live date. All of that needs to be identified with a high level of specificity. You want to make sure that there is some sort of a cost estimate included in that statement of work, and then you want to make sure that it's divided up into phases, that it takes into account certain deadlines. It's got to identify important milestones that are important to the success of the project or to that phase of the project. And really what you want to make sure that you include in that statement of work is a robust acceptance testing provision for the acceptance or the rejection of deliverables that the vendor is providing to you. You want to make sure that they're going to comply with some sort of objective standard that has been mutually agreed upon, that is ideally detailed in the statement of work. And if they don't, you need to detail and have an understanding of what the process is for remedying that non-compliance. Typically what we will see is a situation where the vendor has an obligation to deliver a remedied deliverable within a certain period of time from the notification that it is non-compliant. And then there's a reevaluation process, and to the extent it still does not comply, then something has to happen. Either they get another bite at the apple, or there is a refund associated with that particular deliverable, or if it's an important deliverable critical to the success of the entire project, then you might want to contemplate getting a refund for the whole thing. With respect to the service contract in general, warranties and remedies are certainly important. And I think from a services standpoint, they're going to be slightly different than what you see in a software or technology-related agreement. You're going to want to have an obligation that the services being provided are being provided in a professional manner by competent staff, qualified staff, that they're going to be provided in accordance with generally accepted standards for similar services that are provided in whatever industry you're in. And then if the vendor cannot provide services in accordance with that warranty, you need to have a detailed process for what the vendor is going to do to remedy that non-compliance, similar to the acceptance testing criteria for a rejected deliverable. There's got to be something that happens, right? And usually it's either a refund for the defective services, an obligation to reperform those services, and then if they can't reperform them, it's either a total refund for the project itself. If it's critical, it's a partial refund or something of the like. There's got to be some substantive remedy that provides you with a real way to deal with that issue as it arises. You're going to want to have the flexibility to accept or reject incompetent or unqualified vendor personnel. And then you're really going to want to think about what your limitations of liability are going to look like in that services agreement. And I mean, there's a variety of ways to do it. Typically I think You're going to want to cap your liability at the fees that you actually paid under that contract to that vendor, and then you're going to want to have certain carve-outs in the event that it's a mutual limitation of liability, in the event of any kind of data breaches, confidentiality disclosures, anything like that. You're going to want to either carve out in its entirety from the limitation of liability, or you're going to want to include what we would call a super cap. If you're in the process of negotiating any of these types of contracts, feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you and love to walk you through the process.